Germany has a rich history of castles and beautiful spectacular palaces. However, during the Second World War, a number of these were used or were passed into the hands of prominent Nazis. They were used for many different purposes, and some became infamous sites of imprisonment and detainment. We associate castles with being strongholds with dungeons, and many of these were brought back into use in that way. But today we look at 10 notorious castles used by the Nazis. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Wewelsburg Castle is a castle today that is synonymous with the SS and Nazi occultism. It was built during the early 17th century and was later renovated in 1925 when it had fallen into ruin. During the 1930s, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, had been looking for a castle to use as a retreat for SS members. Himmler then decided to buy or lease Wewelsburg Castle, and it became an SS leadership school and a centre for the ideological training of the SS leadership. Himmler viewed it as a centre for the SS order, and the castle was remodelled with some of the symbolism we associate with the evil SS. On the ground floor of the tower, a hall with 12 columns was renovated for the use by high-ranking members, and it was described as being like the meeting hall of the Round Table. The runic symbols were etched onto the floor with a swastika in the ceiling also. The castle was also the place where rituals and bizarre behaviour would occur, with mystic ceremonies being carried out. When a member of the SS died, his death's head ring would be taken to the castle and placed in a casket, and it's rumoured that 11,500 SS rings were buried on a nearby mountain. Himmler ordered that the castle should be destroyed at the end of the Second World War, but it was only partly destroyed and was then looted. Today it's a museum and a youth hostel. A remarkable and beautiful palace and castle, Neuschwanstein Castle, is a building out of a fairy tale. It was intended to be used as a residence for the king, and today it's visited by millions. However, during the Second World War, the Nazis used it in a number of ways. As it was secluded and hidden away in a rather low-key area, it was used as a place to hide Nazi-looted gold and treasure. It became a depot for treasure taken from France after the Nazis seized huge amounts of property from Jews and other people. The castle was used to catalogue incredibly valuable works of art and masterpieces. The huge scale of the art thefts made the castle incredibly busy, but in April 1945 the SS were contemplating blowing up the beautiful palace to prevent it and the artwork falling into the hands of the Allies. The plan, however, was never carried out, and the palace was surrendered to the Allies. Eventually they returned the palace to the Bavarian government after all the stolen loot was catalogued and returned as best as it could be. Castle Itter was built in the 19th century, but it became a site of a Nazi prison during World War II, and also the site of one of the most bizarre battles of the conflict that took place there. The Nazi government after the Anschluss of Austria leased the castle, and it was later seized under Himmler's orders. It was then established as a prominent place to house French prisoners deemed valuable to the Nazis, and it fell under the administration of Dachau. Many important prisoners were housed there, for example former French prime ministers, and even a tennis champion was held there, and the son of Georges Clemenceau. However, the strangest thing that occurred at Castle Itter was when the US and the German Wehrmacht together fought alongside each other against the Waffen-SS. The Battle of Castle Itter saw the US and some renegade German soldiers turn back a Waffen-SS assault where the elite French prisoners were being held. The Americans and some Wehrmacht soldiers defended the castle against the SS assault, and some of the prisoners even wielded some small arms and pistols left by the guards who had fled. The castle's walls were damaged, however the US were backed up and the SS forced to flee. Schloss Fuschl is a castle in Salzburg in western Austria. It stands on a peninsula and on the western edge of a lake, and it's rather picturesque. It was built around the year 1450 and fell into disrepair during the 1800s, but then it was repaired. It was owned by Gustav Edler von Rimmes and his wife who lived there in the 1930s. However, he was a prominent supporter of the Fatherland Front, and for this was arrested and imprisoned by the Nazis in Dachau. Because of this, his castle was then seized, and it was taken over by Joachim von Ribbentrop. He was Hitler's foreign minister and was a prominent member of the inner circle. However, at some point, Ribbentrop became in possession of large amounts of treasure and gold. What happened to this gold and wealth as the Second World War came to an end remains a mystery, and von Ribbentrop was sentenced to death and executed following the Nuremberg trials. However, there are rumours that Ribbentrop's lost gold remains hidden and buried around the location of Castle Fuschl, his former summer residence. Konigstein Fortress is one of the largest hilltop fortifications found in Europe, and it's a huge size. It was used for centuries as a state prison, and it developed a reputation before the Nazis were in power as a formidable state prison. In the First World War it was used as a prisoner of war camp for French and Russian soldiers, but during the Second World War it became a POW camp again. It became known as Oflag 4B, and it housed British, French, Polish and other Allied officers. It was said that life inside of the fortress was not particularly difficult, and was adequate, however rather boring. The living quarters for lower ranking prisoners were more difficult than the officers' quarters, who were given freedoms of the garden. There were also regular rations for prisoners, and the German guards often bugged their rooms in attempts to find out more information. The camp was surrendered to the French at the end of the Second World War, and the prisoners were freed. Despite not entirely being a castle, Hitler's vacation home in the Obersalzberg, the Berghof, was an impenetrable complex when the Führer of Germany was in residence. He spent more time in the Berghof than any other place during his time as dictator, and it was his most favoured residence. Incredible building projects in the area, such as the Eagle's Nest, made it an infamous retreat for Hitler, and littered around the area were a number of other residences for key Nazi staff and members of his government. Hitler also used the residence as a prominent place to welcome dignitaries from other countries, and he also housed parties and occasions there. Often members of his inner circle, such as Joseph Goebbels and Hermann Goering, were at the Berghof, along with Martin Bormann, who helped to construct the complex and oversee its completion. The Berghof was also fortified heavily, with many SS guard posts and bunkers patrolling the area, ensuring that Hitler had complete safety during his time there. There were a huge amount of renovations in the area, with many underground tunnels and networks established, and much mystery surrounds the region. Although not a castle or a palace, it was a rich and lavish residence, fit for a king or a dictator. Construction of Ksiaz Castle began in 1288, and it's the largest castle in the Silesia region of Poland. It had a rich history throughout the centuries, being home to many incredibly rich people and also royalty. But during the Second World War, and in particular, it was seized by the Nazis. Much of its historic interior was torn down, and the Nazis began to build a bunker around 50 metres below the castle. The reason for this was to protect Hitler from Allied bombs, as it was considered that the castle could be used as a possible residence for Hitler. A maze of tunnels and bunkers was built using forced labour from nearby concentration camps, and the complex was left unfinished. However, much mystery surrounds it today. Some historians believe that the complex would have become the headquarters for the Nazi High Command, and others believe that it housed nuclear weapons labs and also arms factories. Many of the tunnels under the castle today and in the area remain unexplored, and there's also a legend of a Nazi gold train that is believed was transported into the tunnels surrounding the castle. The true stories of this castle could still be yet untold. Mautendorf Castle, it's alleged, was built on the site of a Roman fort, but the castle was built around 1250. However, it's remembered mostly for being a castle that became the home of Hermann Goering and the Goering family. Hermann Eppenstein, who purchased the castle, was a friend with Heinrich Ernst Goering, the father of Hermann, and the family began to live inside of Mautendorf Castle. Eppenstein, it's claimed, began to become the lover of Hermann Goering's mother, whilst the family were at the castle. But Hermann Goering frequently stayed at the castle, and he stayed here following the failed beer hall putsch to recuperate. Goering himself never became the formal owner, However, it was in word passed to him. At the end of the Second World War, he tried to flee to Mautendorf Castle to escape to the castle of his youth. However, he surrendered to the Americans nearby. Hartheim Castle was found close to Linz, Austria, where Hitler himself grew up. However, it became a despicable site of mass execution and killing. The castle, built in 1600, became used for Hitler's Action T4 euthanasia programme and was one of 6 centres. Between 1940 and 1943, around 30,000 disabled people were killed at the castle by lethal injection or by gassing. This included 12,000 prisoners from Dachau and Mauthausen, and the castle was regularly visited by SS doctors who deemed patients not worthy of life. Some of these doctors, including high-ranking SS doctor Karl Brandt, were sentenced to death following the war. The castle became a horrific site of slaughter, and today a museum exists there, dedicated to the memory of those people murdered within its walls. One of the most infamous castles used by the Nazis was of course Colditz. It's a castle with an incredibly rich history, and for around 100 years it became a sanatorium for the rich and wealthy of German nobility. However, during the Second World War, this became the perfect place to create a prisoner of war camp. When the war broke out, it was converted to a high security camp, and it was considered high security and impossible to break out of. The camp became home to prisoners from many different countries, but it was decided in May 1943 to only house American and British POWs. Despite being difficult to get out of, there were many incredible escape attempts, including the creation of a glider that was planned to be flown out of the walls of the prison. Most of the guards were First World War veterans, and those not fit for frontline action, and inside, prisoners had to make their own entertainment. They tried to hold their own Olympics, and even brewed moonshine alcohol, but today the castle lives in infamy as a castle synonymous with the Nazis and the Third Reich. Once again, I hope you found this video interesting. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.